Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be across the nation or around the world. Once again, you are listening to the VMware Communities Roundtable podcast. This is podcast number 634. My name is Eric Nilsson, and with me today, I have my regular co-host, Matt Lungeth. Today is Wednesday, February 8th, 2023. Matt, how's it going?
Eric, much like exposing your management interfaces to a public internet, I did something extremely stupid today.
Yeah. Well, that's par for my course. So
yeah, I went ahead and for whatever reason, I signed up to run a 5K in the middle of March. I don't know why. I'm scared to death. I'm worried about collapse and, even making it half a mile, let alone 3.1. But here we are. But enough about me, sir. We have lots to talk about today. We have a ransomware vulnerability that's been out there that we're going to get into that's made some press as of late. We have VMware's 25th anniversary that we have started to celebrate internally within the organization to talk a little bit about. I'm sure Corey has some vExpert announcements as we get close to making first half applications and going through that whole entire process. But before we get into all of that, sir, my favorite questions. How are you? How are things out on the West Coast? And what is the color of the bay?
Well, let me tell you, Matt, it has been cold in California. It has, we're getting this cold snap. This continued for maybe a week and a half now, where at night it's down into the 30s, 29, 30, 31. And this morning when I got up at 8 o'clock to go get coffee, it was like 34 degrees. So California, that's a cold snap for us, right? When it's staying in the low 30s, everything in the garden is dead. Anything that was tropical is starting to show burn leaves. So it is cold. And the color of the blaze, it's just a calm green. There's no wind. It's pretty chilly and it's sunny. So it's one of these clear, cold, sunny, days that most of the Northeast has sometimes where it's sunny, but, in the 0 degrees, we're sunny and in the 30s. So interesting weather we've got here. Excited to be heading into VMware's new year. So VMware's new year starts February 4th this year. So we are now into the new year. 2024 is our fiscal year. So excited to have new budgets and be getting to plan what we're going to do for VMware Explorer. We're doing interviews with vExperts and champions and the community. They are excited to engage with community this year. Broadcom is excited to be engaging with community as they can before the acquisition. And so, every year that we kick off a new year, Matt, I feel energized. With that,
as
Corey, maybe we should flip over and talk about anything with vExpert's apps that anybody needs to know.
Yeah, got a couple updates. The application voting results, so the awards will go out on February 17th. We're doing something kind of new for those who don't get the award this year. So for those who don't get the award, we have a couple of options. I'm going to hold a call with everyone where they can up their game by building a home lab, writing, producing content about their experience, writing about other topics as well. We'll spin up a Slack channel for discussions to get everybody ready for the June application period. So something new that we're going to do this year and excited about that. We'll have some vExpert pros in there as well to kind of jump in the Slack channel to help anyone with setting up blogs, what to write about, various things. And then one thing that's really cool that we're doing different this year is we have an upcoming meeting with the VMware events team. And thank you to the 150 vExperts who signed up. We were only able to get 25 into the call, which is actually really, really good. But we had a lot of people raised their hand, which was excellent. I am looking forward to this interaction. It's one of the first of its kind that we've done with vExperts, directly engaging with the VMware events team. And that engagement is just going to be, how did you feel about the event? What's your opinion on the general session? So it's really good feedback from community members who have been to the shows in the past. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Nice. Well, good that there, and thanks to all of the experts that have applied this year. It's great to have it. And then before we get into Bob Planker's and the fun with ransomware on 6.x, if you haven't upgraded yet your home lab, you should do that, because we'll talk a little bit about that. But Matt, before I didn't address your 5K challenge that you have, I only have one piece of feedback for anybody that's thinking about getting into pushing your body, to a run. If you had mono as a teenager, right? I would strongly suggest you do not do that. There is now evidence that if you got mono as a teen, you should not do long distance running or anything that puts extreme stress on your body, because it is shown to kick off multiple sclerosis. So just a piece of feedback there. If you did not have mono, go for it.
I had a really bad case of mono in grade school.
Okay, then I would.
No idea of any of this. So, there's my out. I'm not disregarding this, but that's odd. I haven't heard that before. I will have to do some research on my own.
Runners clubs actually have multiple sclerosis clubs that are associated with runners clubs, because runners for some reason have been super high at getting multiple sclerosis, and they couldn't figure out why. But in the last couple of years, they've discovered that mono, you never really get rid of mono. It's kind of like
right,
anything else.
Dormant.
Right, it lies dormant, but extreme stress will reactivate that mono, and then your immune system goes crazy, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, that's not for this show. One of these days I'll do a medical podcast and we can get on and talk about these things, but I will give you that feedback.
Back to being a loaded couch potato it is, so.
Yes, it is. Back to being a geek. The heck with trying to stay healthy. Just live old and long. All right, back to other foolish topics. I thought it would be fun to talk a little bit about, ransomware. We haven't had Bob on for a while, and we invited Bob just to come visit us because on the weekend, I've got a machine in Iraq in San Jose. It's my home lab, right? It's nothing, super production oriented. And I just put it in me and Buddy have a cage down there, and he lets me put my machines in there for fun. So one of my machines is a home lab. And Matt, it's one of these things that it starts as a home lab. And then, my brother-in-law said, hey, could I put a VM up there and run my sister's restaurant website on it? And I'm like, oh, sure, I'll give you a VM, give you an IP address. And he puts his restaurant on it. And a year or two later, we're not really paying attention. Next thing you know, you put a DNS server on it, so we can resolve our own DNSs without having to go deal with somebody else's DNS. And the next thing you know, you put another little web server on there for some other thing. And next thing you know, you have a couple little workloads there. And if you're not paying attention,
SLA.
Yeah, if you're not paying attention, and then we had a firewall in front of it, because it's just a home lab. But then the guy that runs the cage, didn't want us piggybacking on his firewall, so he just wired us directly without us really realizing we were wired directly. Which, okay, it's your home lab. It's no big deal. You got some workload on it. But the next thing you know, you're not even behind a firewall. And now your ESXi login is now being pinged by all the bots, right? And you're not even aware of that. And then next thing you know, the restaurant people call and said, hey, where's our restaurant website? Well, I don't know. The thing is usually up. We never even touch it. Like it goes a couple of years without even touching the server, right? And we go to log into ESX, and there's a happy little message that says, you have been hacked. We have hacked your site. We have encrypted all your VMDKs. You'll find them in the temp directory, all encrypted. Do not try to unencrypt. You'll never succeed without a key. If you would like a key to encrypt your VMs, please go to this URL and submit 2.11552 Bitcoin, which would be like 40K. So it was an interesting experience to see that. And I thought, hey, we should talk about that on the podcast. How many of us have home labs that, we haven't really been paying attention to? And if you put it out on the internet, there's going to be bots targeting them. And my guess is that this was just a friendly neighborhood ESXi bot that's just running around looking for exposures and doing this kind of thing. So thought we would just chat about that a little bit and talk to our favorite guy. And we did Google, you know, what version do we have? 6.7, blah, 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 unpatched. We never patched it. And sure, there is, you know, there's streams that are going out. I think we've had Bob on this podcast talking about the vulnerabilities of 6.x that needed to be patched right away. So I thought that was funny. Interestingly enough, we have another ESX server that's on 7. something, and that one did not get targeted because that patch had been applied to the 7x ESX version that we have deployed there. So Matt, what do you think of that?
Well, it speaks to the resiliency of the product in some way, and I will qualify that statement because I think some operators that are out there, and perhaps maybe in the more commercial and SMB space, but at the same time, and I'm sure Bob will comment to this, sometimes we see this in the enterprise and global as well, where, to use a Ron Popeil phrase, you set it and forget it, right? It's an ESXi host or a vCenter installation that is very robust. It runs, it operates, the VMs churn, and it, for whatever reason, it gets dismissed and not thought about in an ongoing day 2 maintenance operations. So when we have vulnerabilities that come up like this, and where we're not following security best practices as far as hardening, let alone, as I had mentioned before, where we're deploying out management interfaces to public-facing internets where they are internet access, where these bots prey on, right? You run into situations like this. So, you know, Bob, to that end, I kind of go back. It's the product works so well. We sometimes, unfortunately, have these operators that don't keep up with that patching cycle, or look at this as a maintenance operation where they need to life cycle it.
Well, and patching is such a thankless operation anyhow. You know, you do all this work, and at best you get right back to where you started with, right? It looks like nothing happened. At worst, and we know better, right? You know, but at worst something goes wrong, you know, and then, you know, why did you change stuff? You know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, that sort of thing. And software is always a little broken, you know, but you can't see it. And that's the problem with vulnerabilities, is that the you know, you need to, the only way to get rid of a vulnerability is to update the software to remove it from the environment, you know. And so, yeah, this stuff gets deployed. It gets deployed, as you said, with not as much defense in depth. We use the term defense in depth to, you know, to describe the layers of protections there. So if you lose one of your protections, like you have a vulnerability, you've got a firewall there to help stop people from getting to that vulnerability and being able to exploit it, that sort of thing. And so, you know, and that's the trouble here. A lot of ESXi hosts out on the internet, they've been doing just fine, like you point out, you know, and you know, these vulnerabilities are 2.5 years old. And so,
yeah, I think it's important to call out, right, in this context, that this isn't a 0 day, right? This has been out there.
Probably not. And actually, that's sort of a nuance here, is that whenever one of these things happens, it's not like the attackers give us a, you know, send us a memo or anything like that of all of their techniques and tactics that they use. You know, so we have to kind of figure out, the industry, the whole industry, the InfoSec community, all that stuff kind of stops and figure out what they're doing, you know. And actually, it's still mostly speculation that they're using these things. I think there's some evidence now that they're getting in through some of these OpenSLP vulnerabilities, but you know, there's this, you know, fog of war sort of thing. And so people ask us, you know, with regard to the OpenSLP vulnerability, you know, if I'm at ESXi version X, whatever it is, you know, is that safe? And well, is it safe from what, too? You know, so you might be safe from that, but there have been other vulnerabilities since, you know. And so our advice to everyone is, if you're not patched up to the latest, and this is really the only thing VMware can say, honestly, you know, without context of environments and all this stuff, is what we're telling people is if you're not patched up to the latest version, the latest releases and the latest updates, get there. Like, we don't know what these people are using, and who the next group to come along, what are they going to use? And so this is just a point in time. These are some clowns running around the internet wreaking havoc. There's 2,500 hosts or so that we can see in Shodan. I don't know if you're familiar with Shodan.io, but you can search for all kinds of stuff attached to the internet. It's basically a search engine for devices and what's on the internet, the devices themselves. And so you can go there and you can type in HTTP, or what is it? The search filter is like http.html : quote double quote we hacked your company quote, and you can see what it detects. Last time we looked, there were 2,500 hosts that were directly connected to the internet that were vulnerable to this and have been popped, basically. And so that's not good. We don't I don't wish ill on any of our customers or whatever, but what do you do about it? To Eric, good to see you back. The CISA.gov, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency of the U.S. federal government, just released a tool that can help decrypt. Turns out these ransomware clowns are not, I hesitate to say not doing it right. I don't want to encourage them, but they're not doing it right. And they basically encrypt a metadata file for the VMs. And so CISA released a tool that can actually decrypt that and rebuild, maybe not decrypt it, but rebuild the metadata for your VMDK file. So if you haven't recovered your stuff, that might be a path. I haven't used it. I haven't tried it. I've been on the road. As you can see, there's an interstate behind me, but that might be a path. Yeah. We don't support it at VMware. We haven't tested it. Yeah. I think some of the security response folks might be taking a look at it, but it's nice of them to do that and to release that. And so that's pretty cool.
Take a look at that. I think we're going to use it as an opportunity to rebuild some stuff and put some different OSs in places. And we have backups of stuff that we don't have a lot of dynamic data on that stuff. So, but it is good to know. That's nice. Thing that I found interesting was when we talk about this stuff, I'm assuming they're not going after home labs, they're not going after stuff that isn't valuable, right? But
they don't know what's what.
Here is this is just a bot, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
It's just a bot. The internet is evil. It's being scanned by bots. I just deployed a few new, I've been playing with the Hetzner services. I need some new boxes, and I just deployed a couple of hosts in Finland, actually. And when I first logged in, when I redeployed them and then first logged in as root to them, it told me that there had been 35 attempts to log in, and they had been sitting there for about 10 minutes, and 35 failed attempts to log in as root. And that just speaks to the number of bots out there scanning, and the internet is just evil. You can't exist out there without some form of protection. Whether the ESXi has got a firewall built in, it's fairly simplistic. It's more like network ACLs, but that can be used as well if you don't have something between you and the internet. In some of these services, like the Hetzner stuff, I know, like other ISPs and cloud providers and stuff like that, you can configure a firewall in front of the device that they manage or whatever, just through their web interfaces. That might be a way to go as well. But you got to have something. And this is not just ESXi. You don't put your storage array management interfaces on the internet. You don't put your Active Directory DCs on the internet. You don't put, you want an extra layer of protection should something happen. Ideally you've got all the protection, but the point of defense in depth is that if you lose one, it's not a crisis, and you don't get hacked instantly, at least, and so, but I don't know.
It's interesting. I think most of us know all this. I certainly wouldn't do this, but even setting up your home lab, if you just connect it directly onto your cable modem port, where it's on the internet, and you just start messing around with it, 2 months, 3 months, whatever, bot's going to find you, and and then you're going to be setting it up again, right?
Yeah, which is and if you don't keep it updated, you don't have protections. Yeah, you're going to be setting it up again. You're going to be recovering from backup, that sort of thing.
But even worse,
if they break in and you don't even notice it, maybe they don't do anything. Those are actually
Right.
the scarier attacks, is that they just sit there and they just wait, and that's actually, there was a study, IBM did a study a couple of years ago about ransomware and found that the average length of a breach that ended in ransomware, and that's actually a nuance that's really important, that ransomware is the end of an attack. It's a very noisy end of the attack. Before that, they're copying your data out of your environment. They're looking through it. Hey, anything we can steal or sell? Can we blackmail the victim? Can we blackmail the victim's customers? That all happens before the ransomware. And so ransomware is like the end of the whole thing. These folks, the ESXi ARGs folks, are going fast. They're just disrupting everything and whatever and asking for Bitcoin. I saw something that indicated that somebody was watching the blockchain or whatever and noted that they had been paid at least once. You mentioned 40 grand or whatever. They've been paid at least once, but so I guess it's profitable for them at this point. But the scary attacks are the ones that break in and then take this 340 days on average to trigger the ransomware. That means that they've been sitting there on average for darn near a year. What have they been doing? And
using your network as
probably
a jump
all over
box for other infiltrations to other sites
there's
to hide
that,
nefarious activities.
Thoroughly permeating your environment with themselves, disabling security controls, all of that stuff. And so when we talk about management interfaces, it's not just ESXi. You got to protect the whole thing. I'm sorry, Eric, you were going to say something.
Yeah, and the other thing that this kicked off is a conversation with me and Corey about like, okay, the vExpert app is running in AWS, right? It's fine, but where are our backups? Because this required me to think, okay, where are my backups, and how often have I been doing them, and how often does my data change? And if you have stuff in the cloud environment, like, okay, the cloud is more secure, and I'm sure Amazon has some pretty good firewall rules and such, but then you come back to like, but we're running backups. So where are we putting those backups for the vExpert apps, right, that we're running, right? And how often have we brought them
how
off
do we
of
get them
AWS?
back?
Yeah, right, exactly. And it is kind of interesting to then, talk to Martin, who's building the app, and we have all the source up in GitHub, so that's fairly protected, and then we have auto pull down into the production environment. But when we're running the DB backups, where are they sitting? Oh, they're sitting on the VM, right? Like they like, how often do we pull those away, right? And it is this other thing that, and it's not the serious production. It's like the guys like us or community members that are running, one-off apps that we built for something, right? Just to have something cool that we're running, right? And it is interesting to then start digging into that rabbit hole of what other vulnerabilities do we have, and how often have we actually run a test to make sure that we can restore things, right? And it's like, never.
Yeah, it's really about restores. It's not about backups, as the adage goes, and so being able to restore it, being able, we often talk about RTO and RPO, recovery point objective. How much data are you willing to lose, to get back to in your recovery points or whatever. So if you're doing a daily backup, your recovery point is basically 24 hours. You're willing to lose 24 hours of data. For something like the vExpert site, that might be totally acceptable, but enterprises in that with customer data, maybe not. And then there's RTO, recovery time objective. How long are you willing to be down while you're restoring that backup? And both of those things. Yeah, you talk to organizations about that, and you ask them, "What's your RPO? What's your RTO?" And they cock their head to the side and go, "Huh? What are you talking about?" And those are really important things to think about at any size. Even for yourselves, you're thinking about this stuff. You're not using those terms, but that's the exercise you're going through right now. How do we get this back? How much data are we willing to lose? Is what we're doing right now acceptable? And it's everything's different. Most organizations can't just tell you what their RPO is. It depends on their systems and things like that. Everything is different, but this is tricky stuff. It's complicated. As you pointed out early in the show here, it gets complicated quickly. The scope creep, all that stuff. And so if you're not patching, if you're not, you know, and I've always been a firm believer in patching. I've taken a lot of crap for it over the years. You know, well, what if you can't patch? You know, like, well, I don't know. If you can't patch, what else are you doing wrong? You know, like patching is the design thing. You know, it's a short scheduled outage so that you can maintain your systems. Eventually, you know, and eventually your system is going to be down. You know, either unscheduled outage because an attacker got in there. You know, attackers don't play by change control rules and organizations and that. They don't file change records. They don't, you know, nobody filed an ESXi ARG change record to take these sites down, that sort of thing. And so, you know, if you're not proactive about it, you can either be part of the process or have the process done to you, you know, and that's, you know, I would urge people to take a more active role in their security.
Yeah, I definitely
architected a system. I'm sorry, Eric.
Go ahead, Matt. Go ahead.
If you've architected a system where the processes and applications are in such high demand, where you've allowed the architecture to dictate that you can't take a maintenance window, shame on you. That should be done in an early part of the design to understand that maintenance is a requirement, where these systems need to be life cycled. And if it has that level of or requirement of high availability, then systems should be designed in a blue-green A/B multiple site to allow the
load balancers, you know.
Yes.
Well, and even the infrastructure can help. I mean, our bread and butter has always been, you know, vMotion and stuff, risk avoidance at the infrastructure level, you know, and we see organizations that don't believe in vMotion, you know, oh, we can't vMotion that app, that sort of thing, which one, I would urge everyone anybody stuck in that situation to go revisit it after vSphere 7 rewrote vMotion. We don't really call it vMotion 2.0, but it was pretty much a complete rewrite. And it's a lot faster, and a lot of the concerns around vMotioning things.
Stun isn't nearly as bad as what it was.
Stun times, Yep, it's not nearly as bad, and 8 is even better, you know, and improvements there as well. So, you know, you can take a lot of those concerns off the table that were present from like vSphere 5 and stuff like that. You know, let's stop living in the past. Let's live in the present at least, you know, and, you know, use vMotion, use DRS. You know, if a host is failing, you can connect the hardware managers to to DRS and things like that, proactive evacuation of the hosts, all that stuff, you know, and so that you can move these workloads around. I mean, you do need to patch the workloads as well. So how do you do that? Well, load balancers, you've got 2 of them there, you know, and you cluster the database so that you can do a rolling update on them, that sort of thing. And so these things are not complicated, but they're more complicated than just a little lamp stack sitting there or whatever that becomes super critical, you know. And I don't know. I just think, in fact, I made a comment about it yesterday or 2 days ago on Twitter, that if you don't build it right to start with, one of the biggest lies that sysadmins always tell themselves is, I'll come back and fix it later, you know, and it's an absolute lie, you know, like, you know, we all tell ourselves that, you know. I tell my wife that, oh, I'll come back and fix that later. And she's like, no, you won't, you know, and she's right, you know, and don't tell her I said she was right on a public broadcast like this. Geez. But but yeah, it's absolutely true. We won't come back and fix it. So if you don't do it right the first time, you're stuck with it. Sorry, game over, you know. And then it's going to be pulling teeth. You got to explain to management. You got to explain to all these people that don't see a problem. If it ain't broke, don't fix it is their default state. You know, it seems to be working just fine. You know, why do you need to mess around with it? You know, and then you're stuck, you know. Sorry, game over.
Yeah, there's, you know, it's a trade-off in these spaces too, right? Like, this reminds me of the old days where when you had Windows, I moved to Macs because I used to, when I was running my Windows environments at home, and I have 4 kids, I got a big family, and we got lots of stuff going on. I was ITing, you know, 3 or 4 days a month, right, just to keep everything running, right? And when I went to Mac, I realized, wow, this stuff just ITs itself. I could have a Mac and I didn't have to do anything for the kids, right? Like no patches, no bugs, no security, because the Macs just weren't vulnerable like the Windows were in the, where you'd have, downloads of, infections and stuff. And I look now and I look at like the production environment, the small production environments me and Corey run. We just spent time trying to figure out how to do mail processing for the vExpert apps now, because now, there's so much spam control that all of a sudden mail isn't being delivered to vExperts because, depending on the DNS reg and whether they Microsoft or Google decide that you're coming from a mail domain that might not be, it's like, I'm doing the sysadmin work that is needed to run stuff just seems to slowly, because of security, is becoming more and more. And it's almost like I want to ask somebody, is there like an easy button where I can just say, please just keep ESX constantly upgraded so that I don't have to deal with one more thing?
Well, that's been some of the discussion here, we need to do some product work around being able to patch standalone hosts. Hosts that are attached to vCenter Server are fairly easy to manage. We've got the lifecycle manager stuff in 7 and 8 now taking over for Update Manager. Update Manager was all right, but it sort of was lackadaisical about, it would just patch what it saw there. It didn't really care about the host configuration and that. Lifecycle Manager cares more deeply about that, which is good, because in context of some of the other things that we've seen in the security space recently, that Mandiant report from a few months ago, where they had noticed attackers, state-sponsored attackers, basically creating malware that looks a lot like ESXi VIBs, installable VIBs, and that they're shutting off protections and things, and Lifecycle Manager would catch that sort of stuff, and so, it's good that it cares more deeply. But, my point is that vCenter Server managed hosts are in a lot better state. It's harder to patch a standalone host when it's just by itself, and there's a lot of that stuff. There's command line tools to do it, but yeah, I don't know. Can we make it easier? We're always looking for ways to make it easier for our customers to just get this stuff done. It's all overhead, right? It doesn't move an organization forward. So can we do something here to help? And, and as far as this ransomware stuff goes, we've got all sorts of guidance about and suggestions and the community's got great suggestions too around things that you can do to protect yourself. And that we've got some stuff, core.vmware.com. We've got a whole bunch of stuff around security and compliance. We've got a ransomware resource center there that has stuff about how to protect yourselves, ideas around this. Protecting yourself against ransomware is not it's not something you can patch for or whatever. You have to take kind of a holistic approach, and the holistic approach is not just technology, it's also people and process things. And that we didn't get into computers because we wanted to do people and process, right? We got into computers because we didn't have to deal with that stuff. And so the icky people and process things, go unmet in organizations. But you got to think about it. Patching is a process problem, in a lot of organizations, and it's tricky.
It's one of those. It's one of those trade-offs in the community space where it isn't our day job. It's not even our half-day job. It's like it's one of these things that we do because we set up home labs. We do geeky stuff, and so it really does become this. And then if we trade off and then move it to IT, right, then you have this whole infrastructure. It becomes very heavyweight, right? You almost have to allocate $100,000 per year. But what you discover is that if you're not doing that, if somebody's not paying those dollars to do those things, either we as community members have to do it, or it doesn't get done, and you end up paying the price sooner or later. And you can run the gauntlet for a few years and not get hit, and maybe these things
and that's
are
what makes
throwawayable.
it seem like it's fine, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And Matt,
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, Matt, any other thoughts on this?
Bob, I want to dive into a little bit of the technical details of this. And I know that this is still an evolving situation, but over at core.vmware.com, or we're on the cloud platform Tech Zone, where
plug. Yes.
Shameless plug, but a great one at that, because it details this whole entire vulnerability that has been out there for quite some time, that now we're just seeing some exploits with. And answers multiple questions in and around that, and beautifully done, if I may say so myself, from in the
It's a group
security
effort.
team. As any of these
I tend to be
vulnerabilities that come out, that we always detail this as much as we can. But this is a great source of information as these customers have questions. But I digress.
Oh yeah. Go
As we come into this, one of the things that there may be involved is OpenSLP. So for our listeners, what is OpenSLP and why in the
Service location
process?
protocol. Yeah.
Okay. So, and this has been something that was out there and integrated within the product, but it initially enabled and now for quite some time disabled within the core ESXi service. So why was it there? How does this run into the vulnerability? And what are some of the elements of how this might play into how these unpatched systems, if you can speak to that,
Sure.
perhaps are using this SLP that's out there to get in and encrypt these particular VMDKs and RAM and everything else that goes along with it, and a VM that's running on a host?
Sure. So SLP is service location protocol. It's often tied to another management tool, the Common Information Model, or CIM. And these two are kind of exist together in ESXi. There's some management tools out there that use them to, well, frankly, find things, find the devices and manage the devices and stuff like that. Bigger enterprise management tools and stuff will sometimes use them. Among our customer base, it's not very common. It's mostly large enterprises. Lots of people in the world use vSphere, use ESXi, and from small environments to very large ones, and it's the very large ones that are using it. And so when so OpenSLP, this. We can compare it, the vulnerabilities to Log4j, for example. OpenSLP is an open source component, and when it has problems, we have problems too. And so, it was discovered that it's got an issue. The upstream open source component was fixed. We needed to update our component as well. And then, with like Log4j, when there's more eyes on the thing, then they find other stuff. And so there's been 3 or 4 different vulnerabilities around OpenSLP. And so along the way here, one of the things that we've really been doing with vSphere is taking a look at stuff and saying, why can't we shut the stuff off by default? Why can't it just be secure? People can always turn it back on again. Why is it just on by default? Like if they can just turn it on when they need it, and most people don't need it, let's shut it off. And actually vSphere doesn't need it. There were some things that needed it in the past, but none of the VMware products, the interop there, need it anymore. And so it's safe to turn off. And so that's one of the things you mentioned, that it's off by default. And we were able to do that in vSphere 7 update 2. And I think one of the 6.7 patches as well, that sort of thing. And so
and again, I need to stress to the listeners, this isn't something that was just done as an emergency patch. This has been done for quite some time.
Yeah, we did this 3 years ago. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
I remember
2.5
having
years
you
ago
on the show to promote it. I think when this happened,
Yeah,
we had Bob come on and talk about it. So it's been out there for a while. So it's really it's an interesting experience. It's interesting. There are several thousand sites out there that have that page up, right? Which means they've been hacked. Which means there's plenty of 2.6s still out there running, which that are exposed that are exposed not behind a firewall, which is even more fascinating, right? But my guess is they're very much like what? It's SMBs or home labs or people that were just enjoying messing around.
I would. I had said to the commercial and SMB space, and I'm sure that is some of this, but we would also, I think, be surprised of sometimes this happens in the enterprise and global space as well.
Mm-hmm. You talk about
Yeah, I
shadow
guess.
IT. There's probably some shadow IT going on here too. So
Yeah, I think that's what I was getting at. Me and Corey run our lives around shadow IT only because our budget doesn't, if we want to give
yeah,
$100,000 to IT, it means we don't have $100,000 to buy nooks for people in the programs. And so we make these
yeah.
choices all the time. And now and then, I think that we leave ourselves risk to that because, it's not our day job to do some of this. And I think a lot of people make those choices around shadow IT as well. You're
Well,
optimizing
and that's
budgets
why
on.
I whenever I'm talking about shadow IT, I really am not criticizing it for exactly these reasons.
Yeah.
Like because a lot of the big enterprise IT groups don't really understand when they set policies or do chargeback or whatever. They really need to understand what they're doing to people. That the trade-offs being made there. If somebody walks away from that, they're still going to do it. And you got to have a good option for folks. You got to be able to help them, and and it's a tough spot. Enterprise IT wants to do it right and wants to have one standard, but that one standard is hard because it's usually an expensive standard. Like what about
Now,
lower levels of service? What about and I don't know.
the other thing that we do, and Matt, you can attest to this, is that we're community guys, and part of why we do what we do is just to get experience with what our customers actually have to live with in production. And Home Labs is the same reason. We gave away Nooks to everybody because we just wanted you to get some experience doing it and getting hacked. Getting hacked is part of this experience so that you can experience
It's a
what
real
it's
learning
like.
experience. Yeah.
Right, right,
Yep.
right. And so
Yeah.
you don't get out on the highway and wreck the car. You wreck it in your neighborhood a little bit just for fun, right? And it's not like it's something that but it was interesting to see how automated it is these days, Bob. It never dawned on me that it's really, they didn't target my little home lab. They didn't do that. It's just an automated utility that's running around looking for vulnerabilities.
Yeah, I'm sorry to tell you, Eric, you are not special. You're special in other ways, but in this way, you are not special.
Right.
And
This is the
yeah,
war dialer of old, right? I mean, it is
yeah,
just literally
that's
out
exactly
there.
it, Matt. That's that's a great comparison. And yeah, it just loops through the internet looking for vulnerability, things that are vulnerable to stuff, and then it does it again, and it does it again, and it
Now
does it again.
the fun part that I'm going to take away from this conversation, Bob, so thanks for being here, is that I do have the server and I have an extra one. So I'm just going to pull the server out of the cage. I'm going to bring it home, and then maybe I'll go look at the decryption stuff and see how hard it is to restore things. I don't really need to do it, but it is a fun exercise just to see like what did
check
the
it out.
government set up for this? Yeah.
Yeah, CISA's great. CISA's got a lot of resources about ransomware, and protecting against insider threats. Insider threats are a real area that we can't cover from a technical perspective. That's all people in process, and
Right.
we've got a lot of things to learn from banks, from financial institutions about insider threats. And so they've got terrific pages on insider threats. Ransomware, stopping ransomware, what to do if you are hit by ransomware. The idea, a lot of our materials are sort of kind of intertwined with that. We link to a lot of their materials. We've got a really good relationship with CISA, and I'm very appreciative of them. But
Yeah.
and then as far as hardening, like we do publish the security configuration guides for hardening.
Which
That's a baseline.
OpenSLP is on.
It's been on for a long time, for probably Mike Foley had it in there a decade ago, and the shutting that thing off, you don't need it, turn it off. And and so and patching is in there as well, running a supported version. There's some other things, as we have new versions of software, new versions of vSphere, and that the defaults get better, so you have to check all of it, but you don't have to set all of it anymore, which is really nice. You can rely on the defaults if you want. If you don't want to do that and you want to set it explicitly, that's cool too. But and then the design side of things, a lot of stuff we can't cover from that the security configuration guide is what I call a lot of nerd knobs, the technical controls and stuff. But availability, you think about security. Security is what? Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And the nerd knobs speak to some confidentiality stuff, but availability, the ability to patch, the ability to survive an outage, all of that stuff, that's a design issue, and I can't cover that very well in a guide like that. I'm looking right now, I'm moving back to the vSphere team. And so one of my first things here is to look at what can we do from a design perspective. Can we and some of our new corporate directives here to be more prescriptive about things, gives me license to actually publish some stuff that in the past, we don't want to tell customers how to do their business. Well, maybe it turns out a lot of folks would actually like that material. And so looking at a lot of that to, how do you build a secure environment? How do you build vSphere from the scratch? And one of the things in all of this stuff, Eric, I was thinking about, how do you safely put an ESXi host in a situation like you've got, and it can be done. How would you do it? And little firewalls. I've seen people do loopback stuff where you don't have the management interface on the with a public IP. You've got the internet, the public network connection coming into one interface that you've got a VM as a firewall on, and it's forwarding traffic basically to the management interface. So the host it's like this weird, internally plumbed thing or whatever. And I used to do that with some
the extra internet. The extra ports on the box to then route it through a firewall on a
you can host the firewall. You could host a VeloCloud instance on the host itself. There's a bunch of options, and so people just need to be creative about it. And I think some of the stuff comes down to sysadmins don't really understand networking all that well, and and so this is kind of funky sometimes. And so I don't know. I think fertile ground for the community too, if they want to write about it.
I think what really bites me in this space is that when we did it, it was fine. We had it on a firewall. It was good. But then, you're not paying attention. You're in somebody else's cage. And the next thing you know, you're not on a firewall and you didn't even realize you weren't behind a firewall, right?
Yeah, that's not cool at all. Yeah, that's really not cool.
So, but that's the nature of systems and bit rot, right? Like it's not really bit rot, it's gear rot or cage rot. Like you haven't been down a cage for a while, somebody else was in there and they just did that, didn't even tell you. And so there are these things where it was good 3 years ago, but now it's good, not good now. And
how do you know it's still good?
Good. Right.
People rip on compliance, all that, and that compliance is not security in that, but compliance is not security. It's a business process. Right. It's, a whole bunch of other stuff, but it's the periodic audits to confirm that you're still doing it right are really helpful to a lot of organizations. Right. How would you catch that? How do you know at this moment that your system is still set up the way it should be? And that's a real.
And then I'm looking, going, okay, we'll fix this. That'll be great. But then 4 years from now, I'll be like, wait, we didn't have an audit. We didn't have an audit in place to go, what are we not doing that we don't even know we're not doing? So it is interesting. It is interesting. I know we're coming up on the top of the hour, but are we respectful for everybody's time here? So I'll let Matt, ask you what you're doing next year, whatever, Matt, and then we'll Tony Foster is sitting around. I don't know if he's got barbecue or not, but we should let him in the stream if he's there and see if he's got barbecue. I'm not even sure if he's there anymore. But Matt, why don't we wrap this up?
Oh, there he is. Look at that. Tony
Foster. There you go. Mr. Foster, we will get to barbecue today. Matt, let's take us out.
Bob, it was with all security vulnerabilities that are out there and whatnot, if our audience wants to follow you along to keep up to date on these, events as they come up. If you wouldn't mind sharing your socials channel. And again, I will reference out there at core.vmware.com, the cloud platform tech zone, that the security group always publishes those particular FAQs and whatnot as these events come up. But for your social handle, as you keep up to date within the community that's out there, Bob, how are these listeners best to follow you along?
I mean, you can follow me on Twitter. I mean, that's a mixed bag right there, as Twitter is, it's my personal account. I'm just Plankers on Twitter. When stuff like this is out there, so VMware has got the VMware SRC handle, the Security Response Center. You can follow that on Twitter as well. That'll get updates about vulnerabilities. I really urge people, and not just for VMware, go get your asset inventory that I know you have, and if you don't have one, make one, and then go through it. And you go through all the vendors there, and go subscribe to their advisory mailing lists. We've got one as well, a VMSA mailing list, and it's the most negative mailing list we have. It's only bad news emailed to you, and we won't use it for marketing or anything like that. But it's bad news that we want you to know. We want VMware. We've become known for being transparent about this stuff, and we really like the transparency because we could hide it, and then that just causes more problems. We want people to be safe, and so when there's a vulnerability, when we disclose it, we put out an advisory. It'll go out to the mailing list at the same time it's posted to VMware.com, that sort of thing. So if you do nothing at all out of all of this stuff, don't listen to anything I say, whatever, I'm just some wacko on the internet, that is solid advice. Go out and subscribe to your security advisory mailing list from your vendors. You can follow me on Twitter if you want. Most of the people watching this probably do already, and I apologize for that. And but VMware SRC, other things we'll post, usually the frequently asked questions stuff on Core. We'll do that if there's a critical vulnerability and there's nuances to it. Sometimes it's just very straightforward, just patch. There's nothing to do but patch, and I don't need to write a Q&A about that. Sorry, just patch, But where there's nuances or there's a workaround or something like that, we will often write, and it's a team effort. I tend to be the public face of it for good or for bad, but the VMware Security Response Center and the VMware Trust and assurance group and all that stuff, there's a ton of people on the back end of this stuff researching these vulnerabilities, dealing with the security community, fixing the products, all of that stuff, and the credit goes to them, really. And it's really important that we remember all of that stuff. So, and if you do find a vulnerability and stuff, we've got a bug bounty program. security@vmware.com is a great place to email. If you find a vulnerability or something like that, tell us about it. Don't keep it to yourself. Don't sell it to the bad guys, please. We'll give you some money for it. And and so at that, I'll leave it. I really appreciate being on here and getting a chance to talk about some of these. I wish it was under better terms. Any of these instances.
We always appreciate you being on. We appreciate your insights. And for that VMware security advisory list, I would not be doing my job as a TAM if I didn't spell out the URL, vmware.com/security advisories.html. Once you're on that page, in the upper right-hand corner, directly below the RSS feed, is sign up for security advisories. It is a simple, quick form.
Email address,
and boom, it's right to your inbox.
Yeah. If you Google for VMSA, you'll get a violin, like a Massachusetts violin school, and the security advisory page as well. So click on the second one, not the violin school. So
nice. With that, we'll wrap up. And Tony Foster, we haven't heard about barbecue from you for a while, and we're back in a new year. So let's thank you to everybody that's managed to listen to the podcast till the end. What do we got for lunch, Mr. Foster?
Ribs. I did ribs this weekend. I just finished off the leftovers.
Oh, nice. Did you smoke them, charcoal them, boil them before you put them?
Yes, sort of. So I actually started by soaking them in a apple juice brine and a brown sugar crust. stuck that directly on the grill afterwards, let them boil on the grill while I got my temperature where I wanted it to, and then started smoking them. And oh, they turned out good. So yes, that is my report. I got ribs for several days and several meals, and they've absolutely been wonderful. And it looks like Eric is speechless over this.
Yes.
He
I've got a
absolutely
question.
is.
What when you do your ribs, I'm new to smoking ribs, and when you do your ribs, do you, because I know there's like the 3-2-1 or 3-2-2 sort of thing or whatever that people follow, is that, do you follow that, or do you have your own sort of mechanism by which you flip them over and deal with them? And
So I have my own mechanism. I pay attention to how they're cooking. So I'll
okay,
try and target my temperature. I run about 225 on my ribs.
yep,
So I run a little bit hotter than most people, but I like it at about 225, not directly on the heat, off to the side
okay,
preferably. And I'll start with the inside, the thinnest part, down towards the heat. Then I'll flip it after about an hour there and let them go. Then I'll flip it back up, and that's when I'll actually go through and start basting on my barbecue sauce.
okay, cool. Well, thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm new to that. I've done pork butts forever. I've done some briskets, which have started turning out pretty well after some practice. But ribs are a new thing for me as well, and so yeah, and I'm at it. So I appreciate
Yes.
the hints.
Yep. And boiling them beforehand really helps.
That's a good thought.
Yes.
Yeah, I got to say that that makes me hungry, and I learned a valuable lesson running this show on my iPhone. This is a first for me. I taped it on my screen so that I would have it at height. And right at the very end, when Tony started the barbecue across, my iPhone shut down for a temperature warning because I had taped it on the screen. And this is one of these big Dell curve monitors. It got hot, right? The screen is warm, the iPhone is warm. So I got a temperature violation and it turned my phone off. So
Now, did it
there you
get
go.
hot enough to cook a hot dog? No response.
I'll just try that next show.
No response. I'm just going back to our Nook,
Not a hot dog.
Nook
Not a hot
tweet
dog.
from days of old.
Yes.
There you
Throwback.
go. No, I don't think it did. I don't think it did. All right, guys. Well, thanks a lot for the show. That was fun. Hope everybody took something away from that a little bit, just for fun. I enjoyed it. Good to see you, Matt. Bob, as always, thanks for being here. Excited to be
thank
back
you.
in the
Thanks
vSphere
for having
world.
me.
Yep. As always, appreciate it. Tony Foster, thanks for the report. I'm going to go get some lunch. Till then, we'll be back again next week. Everybody have a great weekend.
Awesome.
You too. Thanks, guys.